Mr. Tom Carpenter, Analogue Solutions, here at Superbooth.
Hi Nick.
How are you?
I'm very well.
How do you find this kind of thing? I mean, this is a Meet the Makers thing. I'm going to start with a question that perhaps, just because I can.
Yes. That question, is it?
Not that question,
Okay.
no. It's the question to do with, I imagine like working and designing synthesizers is a fairly solitary existence because it's, you're the auteur, you design it, you make it, you come up with the stuff, and then you get to come out at these massively overloading public events.
Yeah.
How do you find the contrast?
The contrast is immense because, I spend most of the week, the working week, on my own. It's nice, the silence and the solitude sometimes, but then you find you kind of go a bit mad. And that's probably where one of the good things with social media is you have a feeling of contact with the outside world.
Oh, well, I hadn't thought of that.
And then you come here and it's fantastic because you get to meet people I've met from exhibitions from the last 20 years, various dealers and other manufacturers, all the old school manufacturers like Vermona, etc. And then you get to meet the Facebook friends and the customers, and it's like, hundreds of friends in one place.
Yeah, and there is that social connection. But anyway, that was wasn't a very good opening question, really. But so Analogue Solutions, you've been making, it's very definitely a kind of analog approach. How did you get into this? Where did it start for you?
Probably, it's the growing up in the 80s thing. So, I was, like most kids, I guess, around 13 when I'm properly getting into music and making my own choices rather than, my older brother and sister's music choices. So, so you've got all the synth bands coming out mid-80s, early 80s, and, I'm listening to that, and I've got a slightly musical family, so I'm playing keyboards or whatever. And it's just literally that sound of the synthesizer drags you in. And
so what did you do? Did you start with kind of lusting after stuff that obviously it was kind of hard to afford in those days? And did you build or what?
I couldn't afford anything really. We had an organ at home and a Roland electric piano, and I had to make do with that. And then eventually the first synthesizer was actually digital, CZ5000. Which, at the time was just incredible. And I was just like, stunned that we got this thing. And how it is buying all the magazines and just reading every page, every single page, even if it's just microphone techniques or drums,
just soak it all up. Right?
Soak it up, educating, not knowing what a low pass filter was even really, but I remember reading the terms and try and make sense of it all because I didn't have synthesizers at home to play around with. There's no internet, of course.
I guess magazines and that sort of thing. So what did you kind of start building, or were you one of those kind of people that took things apart to fix them?
I took things apart. My mum says as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old I'd be taking things apart and secretly behind the sofa like clocks and stuff. So I suppose it started really with synthesizers. My first was an SH-101 second hand when I was probably like 16 or something. So it's like filter input or an audio input, like basic modifications. So from there it just kind of expands. Eventually when I started working for myself, I'd be buying and selling vintage synths, offering to do simple modifications. And from there, it's the Eurorack thing was just starting. Doper had been around for a few years. Analogue Systems had literally just released their modules when I was kind of starting my business. So I then, I think number 3, started making modules. So, making an LFO or a bass drum, it's a very easy way to get into manufacture because it's just one part of the whole system.
So that's where you started. What was the first thing you built? What was the first thing you built sort of non-commercially, and then the first thing you built commercially?
Well, I kind of went almost straight into it commercially. So I don't think I'd ever built a single circuit that I hadn't intended to eventually sell, bizarrely enough. Maybe an LED flasher or something at school, but I built probably maybe the 808 kick drum was the first thing I built. But I think in my mind, because I was already self-employed, I'd already thought, well, actually, if I'm going to do this, let's think about the commercial aspect as well.
And so did you do that by ear, or did you do that because you sort of knew how it was made?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was already looking at the circuit diagrams by then and interested in how, an 808 worked. And I suppose it's lucky that there was a Eurorack thing starting, because it enabled me to just build one little
individual
piece.
Components, right.
To go straight in and build a whole drum machine or synthesizer would have been an immense challenge.
Yeah, I suppose that's very true. So, I mean, and how did that go? I mean, did you think, wow, I'm
well,
here?
Luckily the prototype, I think, worked pretty much first time, which, if it hadn't have worked and I couldn't have got it working, just purely one error on my part, or even an error in the schematic, maybe I would have just given up.
It would have been a different thing, yeah.
But yeah, it was quite literally designing the circuit board, printing it onto this special tracing paper stuff that you then iron onto a copper-clad board and
dip it in that
dip
really
it in
noxious,
acid, and all that ferric whatever.
So it was like hand-built stuff.
Yeah, drilling all the holes. I mean, it's funny to think back, when I first was doing modules and I had 2 or 3, I actually thought I could etch out all the jack PCBs like myself, build them and drill them. I mean, I never did, but I remember at that time thinking, I'll build those, I'll make 50 of those, or,
So, I mean, I guess that's one of the big things, isn't it? When you start getting demand, you think, actually, I can't make these fast enough.
No.
That transition to having to have somebody else, or mass production, that's like that kills a lot of people, doesn't it? Because it's a difficult process.
Yeah, well, I've grown slowly and I've never taken business loans or used overdrafts. I've just literally grown at a manageable speed just because of the risk factor. Then eventually you get married and that, and I'm not prepared to put my house on the line by saying, right, I'm going to invest, £100,000 in this product or take out a crippling loan. So, I've been going 25 years, but I've grown at a steady pace and just reinvested money to enable to do large projects.
So was there a product after your first one where it really blew up for you and you just kind of thought, hey, wow, I'm onto something, I can do this?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose the modules and the products get more ambitious. So I think, that worked, I'll do another one. And then you think, okay, this oscillator worked, the next one will be 2 oscillators, and you just get more confidence, really. Because it's not just about getting a schematic and building it. You've got to learn, about the whole metalwork side of it. And
there's a lot to it.
And it's more the pitfalls and the problems that you don't know about until they happen, and that's experience.
And then you design around them in the first place, so
or knowing, that if they use the wrong powder coat that's got wax in it, all your ink's going to slide off. And until it's happened or somebody tells you about it, and I've probably just revealed something that a lot of people don't know that can happen.
Right, okay.
So then when you get panels printed, to make sure they use the right paint.
Right, oh gosh.
Because, there's a lot of problems.
So also, I mean, there's the aesthetic, isn't there? Aside of what it does, the aesthetic and the workflow and the usability. Yeah. I mean, that's where things begin to get finessed, isn't it? I mean, is that? I mean, how much percentage of things is that for you?
It's a major part of the design process. The look. I mean, it's the first thing I do. Is I get a general idea of a product, like is it a synthesizer or an effects thing or whatever. So you think, right, I'm going to build a synthesizer, and then I kind of imagine it in my head what it's going to do and what its purpose is, what the controls are, and then it might go to a piece of paper and a pencil just so that I can sleep that night. You have to get the ideas out of your head, but really it's kind of almost straight onto the front panel design, deciding what.
All right, so the aesthetic is always
because you can't put every control on that you would want, so there's a lot of compromises. Just the oscillator section of a synth, you could have 20 parameters
if you want,
and attenuators for every modulation source, but you have to actually kind of cut back, because you start imagining the synthesizer, and before you know it, there's 400 knobs on it. And it would be great to build these things, but commercially it would just kill you.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I've talked about this with manufacturers before, about the notion that, you know, the general public or you know, and critiques say, oh, why don't we get something new? But actually, it's almost like that line to that, what's it? No, you can't handle the truth. You can't handle something really that new because you'll just go, I don't know how to use this.
No. Well, some manufacturers have tried to redesign the format of how a synthesizer is laid out and claim they're being revolutionary and, you know, going to change the synthesizer and for the better. But synthesizer panel layout is exactly like how a car is laid out. Your clutch is here, and you know, unless you're an auto driver, you know, there's the steering wheel. You know where your indicators are. Imagine if somebody said, "I'm going to make a car cockpit different, and I'm going to put the throttle over in the glove box and all this, and steering wheel's going to work in reverse just to try and be different." You can't. The synthesizer layout has kind of evolved, just like every other.
But there is room for innovation. I mean, you know,
there's always room for innovation. Yeah.
It's just how innovative should you be? Can you risk being, I suppose, as well?
Yeah. I mean, you know, signal flow we tend to think of as left to right or up to down. You know, top to bottom. Yes, you know, if you suddenly had the oscillators on the right and the filter in the bottom left corner, and
it would be weird.
It would be.
Well, I guess you can do that if you build your own modular and put the modules where you want.
Or just turn the whole synthesizer upside down, and you know.
Well, actually, funny you should say that, because your fuse box can go upside down or on its end. You know, so there are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like an iPad, and it just flips itself around.
So what area of synthesis currently excites you the most? Where is it? Where do you kind of like get excited about? What is it about them?
It's bizarre because, you know, it sounds really boring, but I still get very excited about that proper vintage analog sound. You know, it's, you know, I'm building the synths that I want to hear. I don't like clean sounding analog. I like it to sound a bit raw and a bit of character, and like it's been teleported from the late 70s.
Well, that's something that people say is a characteristic of your instruments.
And it's I suppose I'm designing what I want to hear. You know, it makes me happy rather than necessarily what the market perhaps is wanting. Or
well, I mean, that's quite refreshing. I mean, or not refreshing in the way it's sort of almost the way that things used to be. You know, because you can focus group things up and say, well, actually, people want this, and they sort of do, but when confronted with it, they might not actually. They might tell you they do.
It might be an age thing as well, you know. So, you know, I'm of an age group where you kind of harken back to the good old days or whatever, and I grew up with, you know, mostly the analog sound. I mean, the digital synths were coming out when I was a kid. You know, I remember the Prophet VS was new and I was getting into it, and so you kind of, I suppose it's like nostalgia, isn't it?
Yeah,
like listening to music that you listened to as a kid.
So, is it you that I've been seeing photographs of Fairlights? You've got a fixation with Fairlights.
Well, that's a really weird thing, isn't it? Because although I love analog, I do have a lot of old digital stuff as well. I mean, I've got 2 Fairlights at the moment.
Wow. Okay.
And you know, for me, it's again, I keep going on about the analog thing, but actually, what I like is stuff that's quick and easy to use and intuitive, and you can get right in there. And the Fairlight, once you've got an initial like to figure out how the basics work, it's actually a very easy sequencer to use, incredibly simple.
So real retro.
Yeah, you know. Oh yeah. Doesn't get more.
Are you kind of an Amiga sequencer kind of guy? I mean, do you do you find that you're using kind of modern technology from necessity rather than, or convenience rather than from choice?
To be honest, I don't think I need to make life hard for myself by using something that's so old that it's just a nightmare. I mean, I had a Waveterm B of PPG. It's like that green screen sampler thing. And it was a right pain to sample sound in. But I did it, and I had got so much satisfaction and pleasure from achieving it, even though with a modern sampler it would have taken me 10 seconds.
Well, may I recommend perhaps an Ensoniq Mirage? if you're looking for some real hardcore hexadecimal kind of
yeah.
sample editing.
Well, it's funny that because you all the commands are done with hex numbers.
Yeah.
I guess you get to memorise them, but with the Fairlight, there's a lot of keyboard tapping to enter commands, and you actually like to copy patterns, and you start to remember them after a bit.
How much room is there for these kind of obscure operating systems in one's mind, I wonder? It's an interesting thought. So, we spoke to you earlier today at Superbooth. I don't know when this is coming out, so it might not be today relative to this thing.
Yeah.
You're working on a sequencer. I mean, projecting forward, do you feel, is there somewhere you really want to go but haven't quite, got up to speed to do it yet?
I've still got a massive thing for wavetables. I've got so many wavetable ideas that I've been meaning to do for the last 15 years that just haven't met the right coder, or just haven't had time to explore that avenue. But yeah, it's, I've had a couple of Waldorf waves in my possession before, and I've got a Quantum and order, and I've had all the Waldorf range, I've had all the PPGs, and that is, in the digital side of things, she kind of asked earlier, that's something that still excites me.
Interesting. I suppose there is more coding side of it, it's not just about workflow. I mean, there must be a certain amount of coding in the stuff that you do with like the sequencers and the pattern.
Yeah, it's relatively straightforward coding, I suppose, at least to coders it would be. Yeah. But yeah, because I want a quick workflow, I kind of try to avoid the menu side of things or multi-button pressing. I try and make them, my products, so you can pretty much not read the manual really. Or if they're, trying to remember what the key combination is to do this or that.
No, you don't want any of that stuff.
Because like a lot of people, I don't read the manual, so you just pick it up and use it. And if I can't just use it straight away, then I think, well, I haven't really got time.
Yeah, well, time is a thing. Convenience and time is a really big thing.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for talking to us. Enjoy the rest of your Superbooth, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
No problem. See you soon.